Pray to your God. Open your heart. Whatever you do, don't be afraid of the dark. Cover your eyes, the devil's inside. As I lay in the cold and damp cell, I couldn't find any more tears to cry. They threw me in here and locked the door, and I was alone in the darkness again. Worse still, I knew that the others had trusted me to get them out of here. That trust is now as bruised as broken as they are. Just like before, though, I still had to hold out my hope. Just like the solitary ray of light that came through the window slit in the door, my hope would not abandon me. My ravaged body, on the other hand, had plans for me. Even as I lay unmoving on the floor, it screamed for relief. Rest was an easy option to pick, but not the one that I enjoyed. If I fell asleep, who knows when I'd wake up. Too bad it wasn't even within my control to choose to go through it. The hallway that stretched before me looked almost to be in pre-war condition. The wallpaper, carpet, and even the windows looked new, though as the heavy rain beat against them, something felt off. The whole of the hall extruded the feeling of being cold and alone. Laughter came from the other side of the door at the end. Even though it sounded like ponies having a good time, none of it felt like it mattered at all in this hall. Slowly the necromancer walked down the hallway. The robe he wore obscured his vision to the sides, just enough that I couldn't get a good look at the pictures that hung on the wall. With a raised hoof, he knocked on the door when he reached it. The sound of approaching hoofsteps made me anxious for what might come next. The stallion who opened the door was one that I had not expected to see. Stratos, the pony whom I'd saved from Jackknife and his gang, gave a hearty laugh back into the party behind me. Only after that did he turn his gaze forward. "Ah, my old friend. Might I have a word with you?" The necromancer spoke with an oily, smooth tone. The second his eyes saw who stood before him, did Stratos almost turn as white as a 10-pony bedsheet. Sure, he stuttered out. With it came a super slow nod that looked like it took 15 seconds to process in his own mind. Another few moments passed as the party behind him now died down to turn their attentions to the door. "Alone?" The necromancer spoke. He gazed around the room, looking over each and every pony that had been celebrating. As he did, he stopped on swivel. I could feel his muzzle tightening into a disgusting grin. Right, Stratos stated as he shook off the shock. "Every pony, the party's over with." With his words came a collective groan. He looked down at Swivel and frowned. "Swivel, go to your room and wait for me to come get you. All right?" "You sure you need us to go, Stratos?" A particularly gruff-sounding mare spoke up as she stepped forward. Brave girl. Misguided, but brave nonetheless. Yeah. He forced a wide smile. "It's just business, you know. Gotta make a living." He raised his forehoof and rubbed at his mane. "Besides, it's getting late anyway." "Sure. Whatever you say." The mare shrugged and looked over the others. They all did roughly the same and started to pile through the door. Even with so many ponies leaving, the necromancer's gaze never once left Stratos. Once the guests had all left, the necromancer stepped through the door and headed for the couch. Once I freed you, you said you'd leave me and my daughter alone." Stratos fumbled with his words. What? Did I say that?" The necromancer mumbled as if he were almost inconsequential. "I guess it is true what they say about memory and old age." "Please," Stratos pleaded, kneeling before the necromancer. "I just want a normal life for Swivelspark." "Yeah? Tell that to the ponies who died in Chasm and Dodge. Tell it to Pallet." "No. Even if it wasn't my fault that started all this, they were still my responsibility." "She shall have that life. Once I get what I want, that is." The necromancer's tone switched from its normal, oily, slick words. Shortly before I sealed all those millennia ago, a certain amulet was wrongfully taken from me. His words dripped with a cold, creeping feeling that I felt in the hallway. And what do you expect of me? Stratos shivered and flattened to the floor. I don't even know where to look. I've heard quite the rumor that you acquired an old boat, one that sits on the harbor in the northern metropolis currently. The necromancer's gaze narrowed as he leaned down towards Stratos' shivering form. I need it. Take it. Stratos practically shouted and pulled his forehooves over his head. It's all yours. I don't care. Ah, but that's not all I need. The necromancer shook his head slowly. You see, I have heard that my amulet has been kept safe inside an unusual place, the center of a perpetual raging tempest. So it happens to be. The Great Northeastern Storm? Stratos whined. That's suicide. No simple fishing boat could make it 2 minutes in that kind of storm. Ah, why do you doubt me, old friend? The necromancer's words slipped back into their oily deceitfulness. Slowly, he placed his hoof on Stratos' head, drawing another whine from him. I'm perfectly capable of protecting us from that storm, but I need you to drive the boat while I hold up our shield. I let you out. Stratos spoke in a soft, regal, regret-filled voice. Why can't you just leave us be? A cold sensation washed over my forehead as Stratos lifted up from the air. The necromancer snarled as he shoved Stratos back against the wall. The sound of cracking glass came from the picture frame he'd been pinned against, and he writhed wildly, trying to break free. No matter how hard he tried, it was no good. How about this? You get me inside the storm, and you and your daughter can go free. If not, I'm sure she would make a nice puppet in my army. The necromancer growled out. Stratos' eyes froze wide in silent horror to the prospect. Don't you agree? All right, I'll do it. Stratos whimpered and stopped fighting. He hung there limply for a moment, a stream of tears dripping down his cheeks. Just, please, leave her out of all this. Oh, how I'm a sucker for politeness. Or I would be if I wasn't in a hurry. The necromancer said as the cold bolt ran through me. The door to Swivel's room flew open, and the filly floated into the air beside him. She lay there limply in his magic, looking like she was asleep. She comes with us, just to make sure you don't do anything that you might regret. Now go get whatever supplies you'll need, and meet us at the harbor. Another bolt of magic ran through me as the necromancer tossed Stratos across the room. He slammed down against the table next to the couch, tumbling for a moment before simply laying there, whimpering. For as many ways as he deserved this, I felt sorry for what I just watched. Oh, and don't even think of running. There's nowhere that you can hide. The necromancer spat as he turned and opened the front door. He trotted out and into the oppressive hallway again. Now that he faced the other way, I could see in a mirror on the door at the other end. With a smile, he approached it and stepped about a foot away from it. He glared into the glass, and as he did, a spike of pain ran through me. Ah, I was wondering when this might happen again. How are you enjoying the feeling of having a Wendigo attached to your soul? He spoke with a sneer. He knew I was watching? How? I hope you enjoyed the performance. There'll be plenty more to come, he said before letting out a laugh that rang into my mind. It was overwhelming and made me want to whine and flail. I let out an agonizing scream as my body felt like it was on fire. The cold sweats that plagued me left my shivering form whenever I tried to restrain myself from flailing in pain. Eventually, My writhing had pushed me into a corner of the lonely dark room. With no idea of how long I'd been out, and no way of tracking how long I'd been in pain, I simply sat and waited. Between the shivers and whines, I could still hear the echoing laugh. I should have seen this coming. Proteus spoke up in the darkness. My eyes shot around until I saw him. He stood in the center of the cell, a disgusted look on his muzzle. I trusted you. I thought you were better than this. How could you? Harmony growled, stepping out from the darkness next to Proteus. Pal was like a sister to me, and y'all abandoned her to die. Just another pile of corpses to add to the mountain. Phoebus spat as he stood on the other side of Preed. You can't even save a bunch of prisoners. You're such a disappointment. The squeal of metal broke me from my friends. They flashed away into nothingness as the door to my cell swung open. I squinted as the bright light outside burned my eyes. Oh dear. The doctor spoke up and pushed a wheelchair into my cell. It seems like, with all the trouble you've caused, we've fallen behind schedule. The mask he wore hid his grin, but I knew it was still behind it. From behind him, he floated out the bat that he'd used from before. I didn't want to go back. I needed to get out of here. But my body just didn't want to move anymore. As much as I still had the hope of escape, I knew I'd been injured far too badly to fight back. I just didn't have the drive for it anymore. I think the doctor noticed it as well because the bat dropped to the floor. Ah, I see you are finally willing to cooperate. He chimed in an almost sing-songy voice. His magic wrapped around my body and lifted me out of the corner. Unceremoniously, he dropped me into the chair and fixed the straps to my forehooves. See, I knew we would become friends. He mutters the final strap wound tightly around my forehoof. It's about time someone respected my work in here. He leaned forward and hovered near my neck. I'm glad it was you. He let out a giggle as he started to push the chair out of my cell. As I sat there, I wondered about the hallucinations I'd just had about my friends. How close to the truth was it? What would they say when they learned what had happened? Could they even forgive me? In short order, we'd reached the stairwell. Once again, he floated me down slowly and carefully. The one thing that felt odd now was the silence that came from him. He hadn't spoken in the last minute, and it scared me. I touched down on the second-floor landing and rolled towards the door. The terror I'd felt before, when I was here, was nowhere to be found. I wondered, in fact, if, because I knew what would come next, I was numb to it all. When his magic opened the door, however, I found out how wrong I was. He started to whistle gleefully as he pushed me into the hallway. Half-dissected bodies littered the hallway now, more so than the first time I went through. One particular stallion laying on the bench caught my eye. He had a rectangular section of his chest missing, with parts of his entrails split and tied. The memory of what happened to me was stunted from the front of my mind. My eyes drifted to his demented whistling echoed down the halls. A mare lying on her side with the same cut on her chest, organs plucked clean out of her. Another, whose insides looked as if they'd been char-boiled next to her. Had he been doing what he did to them on me? He stopped whistling. Admiring my hoofwork? He giggled giddily. You are something of a mystery. All these subjects just didn't seem to possess the same force of will to stay alive as you had. That frailty certainly limited the scope of my experiments. But nonetheless, I do have some ideas for how to proceed. I tensed at his words. My hooves tightened against the straps, and my heart felt like it was going to hammer its way out of my chest. No, not again. I can't do this again. I whispered between my shallow breaths. Even with the adrenaline coursing through my body, the pain in my chest flared. Now. He spoke as he wheeled me around the corner into his operating room. I know these new procedures aren't perfected yet, but I assure you, the merry little filly yesterday very nearly survived. He shrugged and stepped past me, resuming his whistling. Mary Philly? Did he kill Mary Days? She'd be the only Philly-sized pony I'd seen in here who could be described that way. The warden said they weren't to be killed. That fucking bastard. The memory of Tabasco blowing himself up at Dodge flashed through my mind. Even if Stratos let him out, if the necromancer wasn't stopped, Swivelspark could be the next foal to die because of me. I curled my hooves tighter around the straps and whimpered. No more need to suffer because of him, because of all these assholes. There was a sharp snap as the metal pins on the straps holding me sheared from their mounts. Even as it felt like fire was boiling me alive, I was free. The doctor didn't even get a chance to turn around in surprise before I screamed and charged at him. With one forehoof raised, I swung at him. To my surprise, his flesh warped and twisted before bursting into blue flames. I couldn't care less in that moment, though. As he cried out in pain, I swung again and again, blue bursts of fire erupting from his body with each hit, slowly consuming him in one big pyre. I couldn't have stopped even if I wanted to. I just kept hitting him, over and over, with each hit. Long after his eyes had melted from their sockets and his flesh slogged off his bones like he'd been hit with a pink cloud, I just kept screaming and hitting him. When his ribcage snapped and my forehoof caught on it, I howled in my rage and flung his corpse. With a crash, it shattered the window to the room, and his blazing body tumbled across the floor of the next. Only then did I stop and let my mind catch up to where I was and what had just happened. In my rage, I'd missed the sound of the stairwell door, and the odd clip-clop-clack of one of the abomination's steps drawing near. Hey, Doc, you all right up here? You didn't set one of your patients on fire again, did? The Minotaur-headed abomination stopped mid-speech as he stepped in line of sight of me. Oh, shit. I spun around and screamed again, my mind slipping back as my instincts took over. Each galloping hoof step sent blue flames rolling out from under me. The abomination managed to get his shotgun up and ready by the time I got to him. I jumped up and threw my shoulder into him, causing him to scream as blue flames engulfed his coat. He fired the shotgun through his screams and blasted a hole into the ceiling tiles. As I hit the floor, I twisted and lowered myself to line up my rear hooves. With one great buck, I felt my hooves blast his flesh right from his skull before they split it in two. He fell to the floor with a meaty thump, and once again I was left to play catch-up. For a moment, the only sound was of my panting and the crackle of flames meeting my ears. The blue glow that I'd been giving off drained away in a matter of seconds, and the aching in my body replaced the burning that had been there. Without much warning, I emptied what little I had in my stomach onto the floor. A sharp pain shot through my stomach, and a splash of red accompanied the half-digested food. "Pi, are you there?" I whispered and scoped the shotgun from the floor. I guess now's as good a time as ever to figure out how to get out of this place. In the moment that my pip-bug turned pink, the sound of shouting downstairs filled the air. The nervous sensation that we were in trouble picked up along my spine. "Did you get the plans for escaping?" "Yep, I even found you a way out," she shouted, her voice echoing throughout the eerily silent room. "The drainage from the basement of the other building should give you the best chance." "Thanks. I stopped at the sounds of shouts and steps rapidly coming from the stairs. I hooved the shotgun bit into my mouth and did my best to ignore the foul taste. If there were more than a couple abominations coming up here, I'd be screwed. I looked back down to see Pi waving at me. She pointed her hoof up in my vision and I gave a nod. I don't know what she wanted from the medical cupboard against the wall. Without a second thought, I spit the gun to my hooves again and made my way for my new hidey hole. It was a tight fit, but I crammed myself inside. Good thing this thing had already been looted, or I might have made this a whole lot more noise. As I pulled the door back and closed it, the sound of their steps was right outside the doorway. "All right. She's armed and on the loose," Slag snarled. Of course he'd been the one to come looking for me. I knew this bitch was trouble right from day one. Spread out and search. He snipped from the sound of their steps scattering. Unfortunately, One of them didn't go too far to look for me. It sounded like it was in the operating room, only a few feet from me. If I got lucky, I could push the cupboard open and kill him before he could react. If I did, though, the shotgun blast would definitely draw the others back. No, I just had to trust that I could hide. The abomination's stops skittered closer to me. It sounded as if they were right outside the door. I held my breath in an attempt to be completely silent, but I bet if he'd listened he could hear my racing heart. A light rap of claws against the cupboard door handle met my ears, and I cringed. This was it. "Who the fuck left the stairwell door open?" Slag roared out. "Fuck! She could have already slipped past us, you dim-witted fucktards!" "Fuck, Slag. He's going to kill me." The abomination outside the cupboard whispered to himself. The claws slid off the handle with a low whine, and it quickly made its way back into the hallway. After a minute, the sounds of their walking had disappeared, and I figured it was safe enough to come out. I let out the longest sigh I'd ever given and slumped against the cupboard door. It easily swung open, and I ended up spilling out onto the floor. Now that I was no longer seeing red, the grotesqueness of everything hit me all at once. The foul stench of melted flesh, along with the sight of it, made me spin over and heave, once again covering the ground with vomit and blood. I reached out to pull myself up, but only ended up knocking over a metal box off one of the cupboard shelves. It clattered to the ground and spilled open. Several rotten balls of bandages flopped out, as well as an empty bottle of painkillers. A small glass jar rolled out and stopped at my hoof. It was an intact health potion and probably the only actual medical supply left in this place. I took the roll of rotten bandages and looped it through and around the ones already on my chest. Carefully, I slipped the potion into my makeshift pocket and grasped the shotgun in my fetlock. With how much I'd been hurt, I know I'm going to need this once we're out of here. As I took one last look around the medical office, my eyes stopped on the smoldering corpse of the doctor. His screams echoed in my mind, but I wanted to hear them. This bastard took so much from so many. He finally got the justice he deserved. A white light flashed along the wall a half-second before the alarm system rang out. The near-deafening sound meant that it was now or never to go. "Pie!" I shouted and lifted my pip-buck up. "Where's the armory?" My pip-buck's screen changed to the map section. The map had been filled out in its entirety, and the doing of the schematics, if I were to bet on it. A line drew itself to the stairwell before the layout changed to the third floor. It ran down the long hallway of solitary confinement cells before stopping in a smaller than expected room. Needing to head upstairs was perfect, considering they all expected me to try to break out. "I don't know what I was expecting," I said as to absolutely no pony as I stood in the armory room. It couldn't have been more than 5 feet by 5 feet in here. Most of the room was taken up by a console filled with buttons and video screens. On the assorted screens, I could see abominations in various sections of the prison rushing about right where I knew that I could ambush them. Which would be fantastic if the armory actually had guns in it. Maybe one of these buttons? I sighed and squinted. There were countless, most having the words like SFC number 47-E or something. I couldn't stand here all day. I needed to act. When all else fails, I gripped the shotgun in both hooves and laid it down on the security console. I shoved the gun down and pushed it up the length of the console. Almost all the buttons lit up as they toggled on, and the crackle of static came over the small speaker. At the same time, a soft click came from the metal wall behind me. "Care what it takes. You fucking take her in one piece." The warden came over the speaker, sounding fairly pissed. "Kill her friends. Hell, kill every prisoner else. Just don't kill her. You know what he'll do if you harm her, don't you?" "That's not my problem," Slag growled in response. I found the monitor they were speaking on near the middle of the screens. They were in the cafeteria, standing over the dead ponies they'd been feeding the prisoners. From the corner of the room, another abomination ran up to them. "Sir, it's the prisoners." Some ponies released all the door locks. For an imposing mare with minotaur arms and legs, she sounded quite worried. It's a riot, sir. We've already lost 3 guards. What are you waiting for, then? The warden lifted his hoof and prodded Slag in the chest. Get out there and do your fucking job. There was a mechanical hiss from behind me, followed by the sound of heavy bolts slamming against metal. When I turned, the back wall started to crank back, slowly opening a bit to show a larger room. The lights in the slide flickered on, and the most beautiful sight met my eyes. The walls were lined with guns. Poorly maintained, but guns, nevertheless. Laying on the floor and pushing off the sides of the room were large duffel bags with the words Summer Penitentiary emblazoned on the sides. As fast as I could, I began stuffing gun after gun into the first one I got my hooves on. I could only stuff about 6 shotguns and a few revolvers in, leaving only enough room for some of the small shell boxes for both to be stuffed in. Carefully, I slung the bag around my neck. I turned around and noticed a familiar sight. Both my bag and rifle were up against an open locker. Not wanting to leave old friends behind, I strapped my satchel over my shoulder and slung my rifle around my back. I made sure that the shotgun I had taken from the abomination was fully loaded before I hoofed it back into my muzzle. Now, all I needed to do was get back to the others. The words of the warden reverberated in my mind. He was willing to sacrifice every pony here just to keep me alive. All because the necromancer's punishment would be worse than whatever this might cost him. He was just like the doctor. These ponies didn't deserve to die because of me. He had no right to give away their lives like that. As I made my way to the stairwell, I could hear the screams and shouts from both prisoners and abominations. Death for some of the ponies in this fight was unavoidable. I hadn't had any solution or illusion that I could save every single one since I've been here. Maybe, though, if we didn't escape, if we instead fought, we could destroy this place and all it stands for. The lack of my own abomination problems hadn't gone unnoticed by me as I made my way to the first floor. None had even checked the top floors, and that was disturbing to me. Once I opened the door leading to the main hallway, I saw why. A massive group of ponies had flooded out from the main cell block and were fighting their way towards the cafeteria. 2 abominations frantically swiped, kicked, and fought a losing battle as they were slowly pushed back. There he stood, above all the others. He glared at me from his table in the cafeteria. The warden's glasses glinted in the fluorescent lights as his muzzle drew into a tight snarl. With my pip-buck, I might be able to hit him from here. But the ponies fighting the hallway might get hit as well. Could I risk them losing their lives on the chance that I might kill the warden? No. Instead, I pushed myself into a gallop and turned the corner. I nearly tripped over the corpses of a few broken and bloodied ponies as I did, but I managed to keep my balance. As I pushed through the door, I found the twins and Jackknife standing outside my cell, simply looking in. When they did turn their attention to me as I approached, Mora was the only one who expressed and didn't darken. I dumped the bag of guns at their hooves and went into my cell. Laying weakly, wheezing in the back, was Cheap Shot. Several deep lacerations still oozed blood, while the rest of his dark coat was mottled and bruising. There was almost no part of him unbeaten, even though I'd planned on saving it for after we escaped. I drew out the potion found and carefully fed it to him. As I did, there was a loud clack of a shotgun, round being chambered. Shortly after, I felt the barrel of it press against the back of my head. If you kill her now, Jackknife, you'll never outlive your cowardly reputation. Morris spoke up. I didn't need her defending me, but if it served to piss off Jackknife, I was all for it. Ah, no, he replied coldly. I just wanted to make sure she knew that if I wanted to, I could have killed her at any time. The barrel lifted off of me, and although I didn't show it, I relaxed a bit. What's going on? Cheapshot wheezed before he gave out a sputtering cough. He gasped a few times before opening his eyes and pushing himself up. the hell happened to this place? Riot started. I simply spoke. Get up and get going. The prisoners hit them harder than I even expected. I'm betting we could leave through the front doors. I helped steady him as he got to his hooves. When he did, he gave me the most perplexed look. What do you mean, could? He took a step towards the open block, stopping when I didn't follow. I'm not going. I sighed. Some point has to keep this from happening again, so one of us is going to have to kill the warden. It might as well be me. Ha! Fucking good luck with that. Jackknife laughed. You lot can go on a suicide run if you'd like. I'm going to clear a path out of here and never look back. Then I'm staying, Cheapshot said as he walked over to the gun bag. I have just as much right as any of y'all to kill that bastard. He whipped out a shotgun and started to load it. At the very least, he'll get to see my smiling face when he gets blown off. Then I'm staying as well. Mora smiled and finished loading the shotgun she had. No, you are not. Rosina mumbled, stepping up beside Mora and hooking her hoof around her neck. We are leaving. No, you can stay if you want. I'm staying. Mora whined and pushed her sister away. I'm the older one, so you defer to me. Besides, we aren't fillies anymore, and you can't keep me from doing what I want. I find Hope mildly interesting, so I'm going to help her. Don't lie to my fucking face. You're infatuated with her. She sneered and turned to me. She spat at me and hoofed out one of the revolvers in a bag. And it's disgusting. I should just shoot the two of you, right? She stopped talking when Mora raised her shotgun to her sister's head. Remember the night Mom left? No, because you were too high on Dash to remember. Mora spoke in a low, hushed tone. You were out at Spike Trap's bar, and you were all over Whispering Sands. That made Rosina's eyes go wide. Yeah, you remember her? My mare friend at the time? You lie. Rosina hissed before Mora shoved the gun against her to quiet her. Well, when Mom and I confronted you about how disgusting it was, you got angry and broke her foreleg. She disowned us and left right then and there. Mora snapped. Funny how I was the only one to defend your impulses then. She pulled the shotgun back and rested against her shoulder. You can back me on this, or you can leave like Mom did. Either way, you don't utter another word about my choices in ponies. I'm sorry, Rosina muttered. Now, ain't really the time for this. Cheapshot spoke up. We gonna kill that asshole or what? I hoofed my shotgun back to my muzzle and walked from the cell. Cheapshot and the twins were right behind me as we entered the hallway towards the cafeteria. As I peeked my head around the corner of it, I found the bodies of the group that had assaulted the cafeteria were strewn away from the double doors. The cafeteria lay empty, and the trail of corpses led straight back down the hallway. I had a feeling I knew where he'd be hiding, so I gave Cheapshot a nod and pushed down the hallway towards the stairwell. Through the door, we climbed the steps. We proceeded right to the 4th floor, passing body after body on the way up. The prisoners who'd wanted him dead put up one hell of a fight. I could tell when we passed one of the Abomination guards at the threshold of the 4th floor office door. When I kicked open the door to the warden's hallway, the other Abomination was staring at us from the warden's office door. He was bleeding heavily, but still managed to hold the shotgun in his muzzle steady. He fired once, and one of the twins screamed out. Cheapshot and I didn't hesitate, opening fire and shredding the Abomination once and for all. His body slumped back and swung the office door open, revealing a very nervous and blood-spattered pony. The warden quaked in fear, mumbling and muttering something ever as Cheapshot and I approached. I perked my ears as my hooves tapped nervously on the desk. I'll show you all. Ruining my empire like that? His cracked sunglasses slipped from one side of his muzzle, revealing the pinprick eyes of a mad stallion. It's funny. It's all a joke, isn't it? He giggled incessantly. No chance. Not if the others find me. Or if he finds me. Better to go down with her than fail him. He laughed and slid his hooves off the desk. He glared directly at me before, finally, he stopped shaking. I knew it was coming. It took me far too long to react, but there was no time for me to move. I threw myself against Teapshot, shoving him behind the receptionist's desk. The loud whine of whatever bomb the warden had behind his desk filled the air, climbing in range before there was a flash of light. Then, nothing. Chapter end. Honest to God, I'll break your heart, tear you to pieces and rip you apart. Quest finished. Jailbreak. Quest started, none. Levels earned, 1. Perks earned, none.